One serene Tuesday morning in Tulsa, as gentle April sunbeams filtered through the living room drapes, I retrieved a simple brown envelope from the mailbox bearing the bank's logo. The crimson text stared back at me. Account overdue, $62,419.87. My pulse faltered, my thoughts scrambling to comprehend the figures. But before I could make sense of it, the doorbell chimed, loud and demanding. A young courier presented me with a small parcel wrapped in bubble wrap, his courteous smile vanishing as he departed. Within, resting on a deep emerald velvet cushion, lay my wedding band, the modest gold ring Sarah and I had exchanged 12 years prior, a token of vows I believed would endure forever. Alongside it was a note in her distinctive, refined penmanship, "You deserve better." I remained motionless in my living room's center, the package slipping through my fingers and landing on the oak flooring with a muted impact. I'm Thomas Whitman, 34 years old, a mechanical engineer whose roughened hands are more familiar with technical drawings and machinery than financial documents. Merely a week ago, Sarah, the woman who meant everything to me, departed without proper explanation, leaving only a post-it note on the kitchen counter. I need space. Now, I faced an incomprehensible debt linked to accounts I had no knowledge of. The telephone's ring jolted me from my stupor. A detached, professional voice from the bank informed me that every loan, every overdraft bore my name, supported by signatures that perfectly match my own. Yet I solemnly swear I never authorized those documents. What had Sarah done? How had she transformed me into a penniless, deceived stranger within my own existence? The journey to the bank felt like gradually descending into a dark dream. My aging pickup truck growled along Tulsa's peaceful streets, passing the well-maintained lawns and recognizable porches of our suburban community. I kept reassuring myself it was merely an error, a system malfunction that could be resolved through a brief discussion. However, deep inside, a persistent unease suggested otherwise. Upon entering the bank, the atmosphere felt oppressive, the fluorescent lighting harsh and glaring. The teller, a middle-aged woman with weary eyes, welcomed me with practiced composure that failed to calm my anxiety. She accessed my records, and as she pushed a collection of statements across the counter, my heart sank. 6 credit accounts, all under my name, accumulated over 8 months. Designer apparel from exclusive Dallas boutiques. Return flights to Miami and Las Vegas. Cash withdrawals amounting to thousands, extracted in careful increments just below detection thresholds. The sum, $62,419.87, 3 months overdue. She gestured toward the signatures adorning the applications, each one precise and assured, eerily similar to how I mark work orders daily. Yet as my eyes lingered on them, something felt amiss. A subtle arc in the D that wasn't characteristic of my hand, an unfamiliar flourish on the E that caught my attention. The similarities were uncanny, unsettlingly so, but these weren't my signatures. I raised my eyes to meet the tellers, my words emerging as barely audible. These weren't my signatures, these accounts weren't my doing. Her face transformed from professional detachment to subtle apprehension. She inclined forward, explaining they would need to investigate, though legally, the accounts were bound to my name. The realization struck me with devastating force. Sarah, whom I'd entrusted with our financial matters, the woman who'd given me Owen, had orchestrated my downfall. She hadn't simply walked away. She'd methodically buried me in a financial grave of her making. Before we delve further into this labyrinth of betrayal and revelation, allow me a brief interlude. I'm curious about where you're following this story from. Perhaps a vibrant metropolis or a peaceful community like Tulsa. If this narrative resonates with you, stirring feelings of intrigue or shock, please consider subscribing to join me for the chapters ahead. In that moment at the bank, I gripped the statements with quivering hands. Our modest home, where Owen and I shared countless weekend afternoons playing catch, seemed to be slipping through my fingers. I'd always deferred to Sarah on financial matters. She was the independent accountant, the one who understood the intricacies of numbers. My complete trust in her had become a suffocating burden, and the life I'd carefully constructed for us, for Owen, was disintegrating beneath her deception. Departing the bank, I drove homeward in a fog, the damning stack of statements resting heavily beside me like an unwanted truth. Tulsa's tranquil streets passed by in a blur as my thoughts wandered to our beginnings. To that fateful day in Oklahoma City job fair 13 years ago. Sarah stood out among the crowd, her piercing green eyes surveying the scene with unmistakable self-assurance. I was just a timid engineering graduate, awkwardly clutching my resume, when she approached, offered a warm smile, and proposed helping me network in exchange for coffee. That initial connection blossomed into late-night conversations at local diners, romantic moments beneath starlit skies, and an impulsive marriage after half a year. Owen arrived the following year, and I believed we'd created something permanent. Now, seated in my truck, gripping the steering wheel until my fingers ached, I pondered how such profound love had morphed into this devastating betrayal. Sarah managed our finances from the beginning, and I willingly stepped aside. She positioned herself at our kitchen table, laptop open, her reading glasses balanced delicately as she meticulously updated spreadsheets while I handled Owen's evening routine. "You're more suited to machinery than money management," she'd say playfully, and I'd respond with a chuckle, appreciating her financial acumen. My long shifts at the plant kept me occupied, and I trusted her freelance accounting work provided stability. But as I sat in my parked truck, memories crystallized, revealing overlooked warning signs. Those frequent trips to Dallas, labeled as crucial client meetings, occurring multiple times monthly, were always accompanied by nebulous explanations. She'd carefully pack or design her overnight bag, bid Owen farewell with a kiss, and leave me with unfulfilled promises of phone calls. The calls never materialized, but I dismissed my concerns, exhausted from grueling 12-hour workdays. The expensive presents should have raised red flags. One Christmas, she presented me with a premium leather wallet, its price tag exceeding my monthly vehicle payment, claiming it was a client's generous bonus. Later, an elegant gold necklace with a teardrop pendant appeared, supposedly a miraculous thrift store discovery. I accepted these explanations because questioning them meant questioning our entire relationship. Now, these luxury items tormented my thoughts. Had they been purchased using the fraudulent accounts bearing my forged signature? Had my dedication to fixing engines unknowingly financed her deceptions? The mysterious nighttime calls now seemed glaringly suspicious. I'd awaken to her phone's subtle vibration, watch her quietly retreat to the back porch, her whispered conversations carried away by the night breeze. Just work-related, she'd dismiss my queries with a weary smile. I distinctly remembered one night, catching the sound of her intimate laughter before she hastily ended the call and concealed her phone. I dismissed it then, blaming my fatigue-clouded judgment. But now, approaching our front door, these memories played on repeat, each recollection more damning than before. The sudden password protection on her laptop last year, her swift movements to close it whenever I approached, what I'd rationalized as personal boundaries now seemed like calculated barriers, keeping me from discovering the truth she'd carefully hidden. I collapsed onto the sofa, the house wrapped in silence save for the refrigerator's steady drone. Owen remained at school, unaware of the impending chaos. My phone's sudden vibration startled me upright. The screen illuminated with a message from an unfamiliar contact. "Daniel, this is Reese. Vanessa isn't who you think she is. Call me if you want the truth." My heart hammered against my ribs, my fingers suspended above the phone. Reese, the name meant nothing to me, yet it carried an unsettling significance. Could he be one of her clients, an acquaintance, perhaps something more sinister? The message dangled before me like a key to a door I feared opening. The walls seemed to inch closer until Owen's school bus rumbled to a stop outside. Hastily pocketing the phone, I plastered on a smile as he bounded in, enthusiastically recounting his day. Later, after he drifted off to sleep, I sat alone in the darkness, the message casting an eerie glow. Vanessa's presence felt more oppressive than ever, and I realized I could no longer avoid confronting the truth. Once Owen was tucked in, I positioned myself at the kitchen table, surrounded by a heavy silence that threatened to overwhelm me. His gentle snoring echoed from down the hallway, a tender reminder of the innocence I had to protect. The phone weighed heavily in my hand, its screen dimmed, but still displaying Reese's earlier message. "Daniel, this is Reese. Vanessa isn't who you think she is. Call me if you want the truth." My thumb wavered over the call icon, uncertainty churning in my gut. I considered erasing the message, desperately clinging to the diminishing possibility that everything was a misunderstanding. But those damning bank statements and the returned engagement ring propelled me forward. I initiated the call, my breathing shallow as the connection attempted to establish. A deep, weathered voice answered, carrying a distinct Texas accent. Reese identified himself as a Dallas-based construction contractor, his tone businesslike yet measured, reminiscent of someone accustomed to managing construction sites. He launched directly into his narrative, each word making my stomach sink further. Their paths had crossed at a small business networking event a year ago, where her charisma and quick intelligence had captured his attention. She portrayed herself as a dedicated accountant trapped in a failing marriage, painting me as an irresponsible alcoholic who squandered her earnings while she struggled to make ends meet. I gripped the table's edge with white knuckles, fighting back the urge to defend myself against these fabricated accusations. Reese continued, his voice taking on a softer tone tinged with remorse. He described how Vanessa had courted him extravagantly in Dallas, arriving with plenty of cash for expensive steakhouse dinners and weekend escapes to the Gulf Coast. She'd casually display new luxury items, a designer watch here, a silk scarf there, dismissing his questions with nebulous references to lucrative freelance projects. But when he'd grown more insistent last month, troubled by the inconsistencies in her tales, she'd erupted in anger, accusing him of distrust before storming out of his apartment. 2 days later, she'd sent him a final text, declaring she was finished with both of them. My thoughts drifted to her abrupt departure from Tulsa, that terse note left on the counter. Had she intended to disappear with him until her deceptions began unraveling? Then the proof materialized. Reese proposed sharing their text exchanges, and moments later, my phone lit up with a barrage of screenshots that made my blood run cold. One revealed Vanessa boasting about a first-class Miami flight, supposedly funded by surplus savings. Another showed her making light of maxing out a credit card she claimed her husband never monitored. The timing aligned perfectly with the bank statements, withdrawals and charges I tracked to my account. Most devastating was a message from 3 months prior. Once I've got enough tucked away, I'm leaving Tulsa for good. Reese can join or not, but Daniel's history either way. I gazed at the illuminated screen, my eyes burning, as the full scope of her betrayal became clear. This wasn't mere infidelity. She methodically drained our finances to fund her eventual escape. Reese fell silent, the weight of his complicity evident. He confessed to initially believing her deceptions, even sympathizing with her plight. But discovering an old email she'd carelessly left open on his computer, confirming a transfer from our shared account, had shattered her carefully constructed facade. Upon confrontation, she'd vanished. My voice cracked as I detailed the forged signatures, the crushing debt threatening to consume me. He muttered a curse, pledging whatever assistance he could offer. As the call ended, the kitchen seemed more desolate, its shadows deeper. Vanessa's double life had transformed from suspicion to certainty, a tightening noose around my neck, with precious little time to break free. The following morning, still shaken from Reese's revelations, I wandered restlessly through the kitchen, those damning screenshots burned into my consciousness. Vanessa's calculated words, "Once I've got enough stashed, I'm out of Tulsa for good," reverberated like a cruel joke I couldn't escape. When Owen trudged in, eyes heavy with sleep, I mustered a weak smile, serving his breakfast while anxiety churned in my gut. The weight of this situation had become unbearable to shoulder alone. My sister Clara resided 3 hours north in Wichita, Kansas, just up I-35. She'd seen through Vanessa's polished veneer years ago, her frank assessments clashing with my wife's carefully crafted persona. I dismissed her concerns then, but now her insight felt like my only anchor. With trembling fingers, I dialed her number and poured out everything: the mounting debt, the forged documents, Reese's disturbing disclosures. After a moment's pause, she declared she'd reached Tulsa by midday, brooking no resistance. Clara burst in with her characteristic directness, her cropped brown hair tousled from driving. Having traded her nursing uniform for casual wear, worn jeans, and a weathered chief's hoodie. Her embrace was fierce, protective, and she muttered some choice words about Vanessa that would make a sailor blush. She'd brought company. Malcolm, a Wichita connection, a tall, lean man in his 50s sporting salt and pepper hair and carrying an attorney's briefcase. He presented himself as a family law specialist, his handshake confident, his gaze penetrating behind wire frames. At my dining table, we examined the financial records and screenshots like detectives piecing together a fraud case. Malcolm studied the documents intently, tracing the counterfeit signatures with his pen before announcing we could pursue fraud charges if we prove Vanessa acted. Independently, a glimmer of hope emerged, only to fade when he inquired about remaining assets. I accessed our mortgage account on my laptop to demonstrate the house was our sole possession. But the screen revealed a shocking discovery: a recently approved $40,000 home equity loan from 3 months prior. My heart nearly stopped, my hands frozen above the keyboard. Opening the document exposed another masterful forgery of my signature. The money had disappeared through systematic cash withdrawals spanning weeks, with the final transaction occurring mere days before Vanessa's departure. I pushed the computer toward Malcolm, my voice unsteady as I explained my complete ignorance of this loan's existence. Clara gripped my shoulder supportively while Malcolm's expression grew grave. He grimly noted how this development transformed everything. Our home, Owen's sanctuary, had already become Vanessa's latest plundered asset. Fear gripped my chest, but Clara's firm squeeze and resolute voice pierced through my mental fog. She emphasized how Vanessa had previously undervalued our resilience. Her attempts to sever my family ties hadn't fully succeeded. Malcolm, pen in hand, began jotting notes on his legal pad with focused determination. He elaborated that while the fraudulent equity loan strengthened our case significantly, we needed to gather additional evidence: banking documentation, testimonies from witnesses, anything connecting Vanessa to those systematic withdrawals. As a personal favor to Clara, he committed to handling the case pro bono initially, his steady confidence providing an anchor when I felt myself spiraling. Still processing the shock, I managed to nod as he assured me he'd immediately file for an emergency motion to protect our remaining assets. Later that evening, after Clara and Malcolm retreated to a nearby motel, I found myself on the back porch, enveloped by Tulsa's distinctive atmosphere, freshly mowed grass mingling with approaching thunder. The equity loan represented more than mere finances. It was Owen's shelter, these walls marking his growth through the years. Vanessa's actions went beyond depleting our accounts. She'd wagered our entire future, leaving me to salvage the pieces of a life she'd shattered. My phone's sudden buzz announced another mortgage payment warning, the first of many looming threats if I couldn't mount a defense. Gazing at the gathering storm clouds, I felt something stir within, beyond the fear and rage, a steely determination taking root. Clara's words rang true. Vanessa believed she'd left me isolated, but she'd overlooked my remaining support system, the people ensuring I wouldn't crumble. 2 days following Clara and Malcolm's strategic planning session, a certified mail envelope arrived, its official stamp resembling an ominous signal. Standing at the kitchen counter, I tore it open, my heart racing as I examined the divorce documentation for Vanessa's attorney. Her demands were staggering: full transfer of the $62,000 credit debt and $40,000 equity loan to me, claiming I consented to these expenses as an accommodating spouse. For Owen, she proposed a measly $200 monthly child support payment, barely enough for school meals, let alone his other needs. Reading her affidavit, my hands trembled at her audacious narrative, portraying herself as a victim who'd nobly attempted to curb my alleged reckless spending habits. Though every statement reeked of deception, her sheer brazenness ignited an unprecedented fire within me. That evening, our home descended into complete darkness. I pressed the light switch repeatedly. Nothing happened. The breaker box showed no issues. When I called the utility company using Clara's borrowed phone, my fears were confirmed. Vanessa had terminated our electricity and water service, claiming she'd relocated and I'd assume responsibility for the utilities. The customer service representative's apologetic voice sounded distant and tinny, explaining that service restoration would take days without immediate payment I couldn't make with our accounts completely emptied. Owen wandered into the kitchen, his baseball cap tilted backward, and stared concernedly at the silent refrigerator. I maintained an upbeat tone while explaining our temporary situation, but I noticed his small shoulders tense up. He nodded silently, retrieved a flashlight from the junk drawer, and promised to devise a solution. By daybreak, Owen had surpassed all expectations. Rising early, he'd emptied his piggy bank and walked to the nearby store, using his saved $8 to purchase bread and peanut butter. He'd even approached our neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, a retired educator known for her keen observation and compassionate nature, requesting spare candles. She arrived bearing a basket of leftover food, water, and a commitment to spread word of our situation. Soon after, Mr. Carver from across the street delivered a portable propane stove, his gruff demeanor softening as he gently patted Owen's head. The Hendersons, who lived down the block, brought batteries and a radio, their silent support enveloping us like a protective barrier. Owen radiated pride, his 10-year-old spirit shining brighter than our candlelit surroundings. I embraced him tightly, emotion catching in my throat, amazed at how he'd transformed our crisis into community support. However, Vanessa wasn't finished. Late that night, while Owen slept peacefully on the couch beneath a quilt, my phone lit up with an email from her attorney. The attachment contained a grainy surveillance photo of me exiting the bank last week, complete with timestamp and caption, evidence of financial irresponsibility. My heart plummeted. She'd hired someone to follow me, manipulating a moment of desperation into ammunition against me. The email threatened that if I contested the divorce terms, she'd pursue full custody of Owen, citing my instability as dangerous. Staring at the screen, watching the candle flame flicker peripherally, I felt a coldness beyond our unheated surroundings. She wasn't merely after financial gain. She intended to eliminate my presence from Owen's life, seeking victory through our separation. I paced the living room, each step causing the floorboards to groan beneath my boots, as rage and fear waged war within me. Owen shifted in his sleep, murmuring softly, and I paused to observe his serene expression. He'd handled this turmoil remarkably well, mobilizing neighbors I'd barely exchanged greetings with, showing that Vanessa hadn't succeeded in breaking our spirit. I reflected on Clara's unwavering determination, Malcolm's methodical approach to legal documents, and how the community had woven itself into a protective network around us. Vanessa's surveillance photo was a desperate attempt, but it wouldn't stand. Malcolm had secured bank footage that clearly showed my genuine shock, not guilt. Settling beside Owen, I gently smoothed his hair, feeling that same fierce determination from the divorce papers resurface. She'd cut our utilities, distorted our narrative, threatened my child, but I would fight with every ounce of strength I possessed. The battle wasn't finished, and her next attack loomed ominously, but I was no longer the man she'd abandoned. 7 days after Vanessa's custody threat, my phone illuminated with her name late at night. Standing on the porch, surrounded by the symphony of crickets in the Tulsa darkness, I answered, steeling myself. Her voice quivered, distinctly different from her typical calculated demeanor. She informed me that the bank had initiated a fraud investigation, freezing her accounts, and implored me to halt the proceedings. She insisted things had gone too far, claiming she'd lose everything without my intervention. I listened silently, gripping the railing tighter, almost swayed by her desperation until I remembered Owen shivering in the darkness she'd created. I instructed her to arrive at the house at 7 tomorrow evening, promising only discussion. She accepted, clearly relieved, unaware of the plan I'd set in motion. The following day hummed with quiet activity. I contacted Clara, who'd remained in Tulsa to assist, and Malcolm, who'd uncovered security footage proving my innocence in the equity loan matter. Reese messaged about driving up from Dallas, eager to confront the woman who deceived him too. Owen caught fragments of my conversations and tugged my sleeve, eyes sparkling with inspiration. He revealed he'd been busy, organizing more than just neighbors. My confusion lifted when he flashed a knowing smile, promising revelation that evening. By 6, the house filled with arrivals. Clara arranged folding chairs throughout the living room, determination etched on her face. Malcolm organized his documentation, his composed focus reassuring. Reese entered, shoulders tense and imposing, boots scuffing the floor. Mrs. Delgado arrived with empanadas and a resolute nod. Mr. Carver and the Hendersons entered, followed by my plant colleagues, Javier and Kim, who'd heard our story and insisted on participating. Owen darted between them, orchestrating his assembled allies like a young commander. At 7 precisely, Vanessa's heels echoed on the porch steps. When I opened the door, her composure shattered at the sight of the crowded room. Her sleek blonde hair was pulled into a severe bun, her expensive coat a stark contrast to our modest furnishings, and her eyes frantically searched for an escape route. I motioned her inside, my voice steady as I suggested she meet everyone. She wavered before stepping in, her self-assurance diminishing with each footfall. Clara rose first, arms firmly crossed, and detailed how Vanessa had systematically cut her from our lives, her words sharp with accumulated resentment. Malcolm followed, sliding the falsified loan documents across the table, his clinical explanation of fraud charges resonating like a judge's verdict. Reese loomed above her, his southern accent pronounced as he recited her messages. Empty promises and calculated lies, his disappointment hardening into resolve. The neighbors' voices rose in unison. Mrs. Delgado recounted Owen's request for candles, indignation flaring at Vanessa's heartlessness. Mr. Carver spoke gruffly about the camping stove, condemning the conditions she'd forced upon a child. Javier and Kim described my unwavering dedication despite her attempts to destroy my reputation. Vanessa collapsed into a chair, fingers fidgeting nervously, her justifications drowned by the collective testimony. Owen emerged last, small yet resolute, clutching a wrinkled paper, a list of names in childish handwriting. Neighbors, colleagues, Clara, even his school teacher. He faced Vanessa, speaking clearly, explaining how her attempt to isolate us had instead united an entire community. Her eyes lowered, mascara running with tears, but I remained unmoved, witnessing justice unfold. I stood before her, unwavering, and declared her failure to understand our resilience. I explained that the investigation would proceed, that I would protect Owen and our home, not from vengeance, but because she'd left no alternative. She pleaded for compromise, but I silently directed her to leave. She stumbled out, the house remaining quiet until her vehicle's tires squealed away. A wave of liberation washed over me as Owen's small hand found mine. Clara offered a supportive pat. Malcolm collected his evidence, and others murmured encouragement, their solidarity forming an unexpected shield. Vanessa had crafted her scheme meticulously, but we dismantled it systematically, revealing a strength she could never comprehend. In the aftermath of Vanessa's departure, her defeat lingered like settling dust after a tempest. Malcolm's call pierced through one brisk morning, his voice unwavering as he delivered the news. The bank's investigation had culminated in felony fraud charges against her. They discovered the equity loan money traced to a concealed account in Dallas, registered solely in her name, a careless oversight that exposed her elaborate scheme. Justice moved swiftly. She accepted a guilty plea to avoid severe punishment, mandated to return half the misappropriated funds over years of financial struggle. Her reputation in accounting disintegrated, with clients abandoning her rapidly, and whispers of her deceit echoed from Tulsa to her unknown destination. I envisioned her solitude, stripped of the luxury she desperately pursued, feeling not triumph, but an empty silence where rage once resided. Owen and I began our gradual reconstruction. The neighborhood's support persisted, Mrs. Delgado bringing her comforting empanadas, Mr. Carver offering his straightforward wisdom, their compassion weaving stability back into our lives. Clara remained steadfast, guiding me through bank negotiations to preserve our home, her unwavering devotion anchoring us through turbulent times. We secured refinancing, managing tight payments through additional plant shifts. Owen created his own chore schedule, proudly displayed on the refrigerator, his small hands washing dishes to lighten my burden. One evening, he nestled in my lap, baseball cap tilted, declaring his preference for our current family dynamic. I embraced him tightly, his presence dispelling the remaining shadows of Vanessa's influence. Yet fate held one final revelation. An unmarked letter appeared beneath our door one gusty afternoon. Unfolding, it revealed Vanessa's once elegant handwriting, now erratic and desperate. Riding from an unnamed motel southward, she revealed a private investigator's pursuit over mounting debts, fresh obligations unrelated to our past. Her frenzied words suggested another escape, possibly crossing state lines, imploring me to shield Owen from her continuing chaos. I carefully folded the letter, chest constricting, and reduced it to ashes in our backyard, watching her desperate plea disappear. Even now, she sowed discord, but this time we stood protected. Later, watching Tulsa's twilight paint the sky, I contemplated the scars of her betrayal. My tendency to trust blindly had been my weakness, a gift bestowed too generously, yet its loss brought profound wisdom. Clara's steadfast support, Owen's resilience, the community's upliftment during our darkest moments. These proved more valuable than any financial statement. Our future stretched ahead, modest but authentically ours, and I would safeguard it vigilantly, not fearing Vanessa's specters, but honoring the child who'd revealed the true essence of family. And so concludes this chapter of our story. Perhaps it resonated deeply with your own experiences, or maybe it caught you unexpectedly. I welcome your thoughts and reflections in the comments below, no matter where you're tuning in from. If this narrative touched something within you, consider showing your support with a like, and subscribe for future stories. Until our paths cross again in the next chronicle.